A woman fell over 10,000 meters from the sky. No parachute, no equipment, just her body, the freezing air, and the ground rushing toward her at 200 kilometers per hour. And she lived. That story is waiting for you at the end of this video, and trust me, you are not going to believe it. Hey, welcome to the Mystery of Science. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. It genuinely helps. Now let's get into it. You've probably fallen before. Maybe off a bike, down some stairs, off a wall you had no business climbing, and for a second your entire brain went blank. That half second of pure freefall before impact is one of the most universal human experiences there is. But here's the thing, that same physics that gave you a scraped knee is the exact same physics that kills people from buildings, bridges, and cliffs every single day. So today, we're going from the ground up, level by level, height by height. We're going to find out exactly where the human body stops being able to handle what gravity throws at it, and exactly where survival becomes a miracle rather than a possibility. And before we go any further, tell me in the comments, what's the highest point you've ever fallen from? Because I guarantee some of you have stories that are going to blow everyone else's mind. Let's start at the bottom. 0.5 meter, about the height of a kitchen chair. This sounds almost embarrassing to include, but this is actually how a lot of people end up in the emergency room, particularly older adults. You trip over something, your brain hasn't processed what's happening yet, and your hands or your knees take the full hit before you can even react. At this height, your body generates almost no meaningful kinetic energy.
Think of dropping a rubber ball onto hard wood. It bounces, it doesn't break. A young, healthy adult walks away from this with maybe a bruise and a wounded ego. But for someone over 65, this exact height, 0.5 meter, a simple stumble, can mean a fractured wrist, a cracked hip, or a head injury serious enough to require surgery. The height isn't the only variable here. The body doing the falling matters enormously. 1 meter is roughly the height of a standard kitchen counter. If someone picked you up and dropped you flat onto the floor from that height, you'd feel it. In a healthy adult, a 1 meter fall is painful and can absolutely cause fractures, especially to the wrist and forearm, because your instinct is to throw your hands out to catch yourself. That instinct actually works against you. Your arm absorbs the full force instead of spreading it. In older adults or anyone with reduced bone density, 1 meter is genuinely dangerous territory. And here's the first real lesson of this video. How you land matters more than how far you fall. A 1 meter fall onto concrete head first can be far more lethal than a 5 meter fall where you land correctly. Keep that in mind because it's going to keep coming up. 2 meters, roughly the height of a standard door frame or the top of a refrigerator. This is where things start to feel real. At 2 meters, the forces hitting your body on impact can cause fractures to the ankles, ribs, and in some cases the pelvis if you haven't distributed the energy at all. Surviving? Absolutely possible. Walking away without consequences? Much less likely. Here's something interesting though. 2 meters is actually the standard training height in disciplines like parkour and freerunning.
Athletes who do this professionally spend months learning to land rolling, not standing, specifically to spread the kinetic energy through their body over time rather than absorbing it all in one brutal instant. The physics is simple. The longer your body takes to stop moving, the less peak force hits any single point. It's the difference between stopping gradually and stopping like a car hitting a wall. 3 meters is the height of a typical one-story rooftop. If you've ever watched a construction crew work, this is roughly where workers on basic scaffolding operate, and it's one of the most common heights for serious workplace accidents globally. At 3 meters, the impact starts to threaten internal structures. Pulmonary contusions, essentially bruised lungs, become a real possibility. Small internal bleeds in the abdominal cavity. If you land on your back, spinal compression injuries enter the picture. You can survive a 3 meter fall, but your body will remember it. 5 meters? Think of it like falling from the roof of a 2-story house, or from a large tree you had absolutely no reason to be in. At 5 meters, even a well-executed, controlled landing carries real risk of vertebral fracture, broken ribs, and traumatic brain injury if your head makes contact with the ground. You can survive 5 meters, but you're not walking away from it unchanged. Something is breaking, something is tearing, and the recovery is going to be long. This is the point in the video where I want to ask you something directly, and this is important. We're only at 5 meters. We're not even close to where things get truly unsurvivable yet. So stay with me. because what's coming in the next few levels is where the human body starts to hit its absolute biological limits. 10 meters. This is a high diving platform at an Olympic pool. When you hit the ground, or water if you're not aligned correctly, from this height, your body is traveling at roughly 50 kilometers per hour on impact. 50 kilometers per hour. That's comparable to a cyclist at full sprint slamming directly into a concrete barrier with no protection, using their entire body as the point of contact. The injuries at this level include multiple limb fractures, severe chest trauma, liver lacerations, and potential rupture of the spleen. People have survived falls from 10 meters, but almost universally that survival comes with permanent consequences: reduced mobility, multiple surgeries, months of rehabilitation, and structural damage that never fully heals. This is no longer "you're going to be sore tomorrow" territory. This is "your life changes after this" territory. 15 meters, the top of a 5-story building. At this height, impact speed reaches around 65 kilometers per hour. The statistics here start becoming very grim. Falls from 15 meters, when they involve landing on the head or back, carry mortality rates that most trauma databases place above 50%, even with immediate emergency response. If you land on your feet, survival is more possible, but the physics is brutal. Your legs act like structural columns under catastrophic load. The femur, the strongest bone in the human body, can fracture upward through the pelvis, driving bone fragments directly into abdominal organs. The forces that hit your spine from a feet-first landing at this height are enormous. Surviving 15 meters is possible. It happens, but it requires a combination of body position, surface, and luck that most people cannot count on. 25 meters, an 8-story building. This is where trauma medicine shifts its language. At this height, impact velocity approaches 80 kilometers per hour. The human thoracic cavity, your chest, is simply not designed to withstand deceleration at this speed. The aorta, the largest artery in the body, can shear from its moorings due to the sudden stop. Brain trauma from deceleration alone, even without direct head impact, becomes a serious threat. The liver, the spleen, and the major blood vessels are all at catastrophic risk. In trauma literature, 25 meters is regularly classified as a presumptive lethal height. Survival cases exist, but they are the exception, not the rule, and they almost always involve immediate surgical intervention and a significant portion of fortune. 45 meters, this is where the conversation about physics starts to matter more than the conversation about anatomy, because at this height, survival is no longer primarily about the human body's capabilities, it's about the environment. At 45 meters, your impact velocity is approaching 110 kilometers per hour. The ground as we normally encounter it, pavement, packed dirt, grass, does not offer any meaningful cushion at this speed. The forces are simply fatal against a rigid surface. But here's where it gets genuinely fascinating. Survival at this height has happened, and it's happened because of terrain. There are documented cases of people falling into deep snowbanks, dense brush, or soft mud slopes, materials that extend the stopping distance and reduce peak impact force significantly. One case from Canada involved a skier who tumbled more than 40 meters down a ravine and survived because the fresh powder absorbed enough energy to keep the peak deceleration below lethal levels. The snow didn't stop him instantly, it slowed him gradually, and that gradual deceleration is literally the difference between life and death. 60 meters, and this is where something fundamental changes, not just for survival, but for the physics of the fall itself. At 60 meters, the human body in freefall has reached what's called terminal velocity. The drag from air resistance exactly equals the gravitational pull, and you stop accelerating. Your speed plateaus at around 200 kilometers per hour. What this means, and this is the part most people don't immediately grasp, is that beyond 60 meters, additional height adds no additional impact force. If you fall from 60 meters or from 600 meters, you hit the ground at the same speed. The fall takes longer, the impact is identical. This is why in the documented cases of high-altitude survival, the height itself was secondary to the landing surface. A person falling from 60 meters onto hard ground and a person falling from 300 meters onto hard ground experience the same terminal event. The only variable that changes the outcome is what they land on. So here's the truth. With optimal conditions, a relaxed body, a good trajectory, and a surface that absorbs energy gradually, survival has been documented up to around 20 to 30 meters with some frequency. Beyond that, you're increasingly dependent on variables outside your control. But there is one case that sits entirely outside every framework we've discussed today. Vesna Vulović. In January of 1972, Vesna was a flight attendant for Yugoslav Airlines. A bomb detonated in the cargo hold of her aircraft at cruising altitude, tearing the plane apart over Czechoslovakia. She was not thrown clear. She fell still partially inside a section of the fuselage, more than 10,000 meters, over 6 miles, and she survived. Multiple fractures, a broken skull, temporary paralysis, and months of hospitalization. But she lived. She went on to work again. She later became something of a political figure in Serbia. The factors that saved her were extraordinary and almost impossible to replicate. The fuselage section slowed her fall and changed her trajectory. The snow-covered forest terrain she landed on provided a degree of absorption, and her body was unconscious, completely limp, which prevented the muscular tension that dramatically worsens blunt trauma injuries. Her survival was not a testament to human physical limits. It was a convergence of circumstances that will almost certainly never occur again in the same combination. So what is the actual answer? How far can a human fall and survive? The honest answer is, it depends, but not infinitely. Under realistic conditions with a healthy adult, the upper boundary of survivable with some frequency sits around 10 meters. Between 10 and 30 meters, survival becomes increasingly exceptional and increasingly dependent on circumstances outside your control. Beyond 30 meters, you are in territory where survival requires the kind of luck that doesn't follow rules. The physics doesn't care about your health, your age, your fitness, or your intentions. Gravity applies the same force to everyone.
What changes outcomes is position, surface, and the margin between how fast you stop and how fast your organs can handle stopping. The human body is remarkably resilient. It is also remarkably fragile, and the line between those two things, as we've seen today, is thinner than most people ever think about. If you made it this far, subscribe to The Mystery of Science if you haven't already, and tell me down in the comments, what's the highest place you've ever fallen from? I want to hear the stories. Some of you are holding on to things that deserve to be told. See you in the next one.